Hey, folks, welcome back. This is Mark Devine with the Unbeatable Mind podcast. Super stoked to have you here today. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. As you know, I really do not take your attention lightly with everything vying for your attention out there. The fact that you are listening to the Unbeatable Mind podcast means a lot. It also helps if you rate it. So please rate the podcast so other folks can find it. I think we have over 1,000 5 stars. We want to keep that trend rolling. My guest today is a friend, entrepreneur, author. We have so much in common. In fact, I'm slightly envious of his lifestyle. So I can't wait to talk about it and have him share the life that he set up. All of its ups and downs, because for every positive there's a dark side, right? And it's Patrick Sweeney. Patrick, author of Fear is Fuel, known as the Fear Guru, former Olympic level athlete, entrepreneur, started several tech companies, and has overcome cancer. I mean, there's just so much about Patrick that I love about you. Your story is amazing. And you're in your home in Chamonix, France. Like, how many people get to split their time between Chamonix, one of the most beautiful places in the world, and Boston, right?
In Boston.
Other,
yeah,
Boston,
Boston's the work.
So you were telling me before we started that you were, mountain biking and ice climbing and swimming in the Mediterranean or diving in the Mediterranean, all in the last, 5 or 6 days.
last week and a half. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And for anyone who's looking for the ultimate place to live, Chamonix is it for me. And that's why, what originated as a 6-month exciting experience for our family turned into now 10 years of just living this incredible lifestyle. So yeah, I'm very, very blessed.
And do you have to be a citizen to own there? Or how does that work for you?
Yeah, so for me, I'm really lucky, and part of my story is being the son of first generation Irish immigrants. So I got an Irish passport when I was training for the Olympics, and so I've got Irish and American passports. But it makes it easier. Makes it easier to own a house here and to
Cuts out a
to
lot of
work
the
and
red
travel.
tape, right? Because you're an
It
EU
it
member.
does. Yeah, exactly. But there's, I mean, and honestly, Mark, any of your listeners who want to come and do 6 months or a year or a couple of years here, there's tons of Americans here, and we do a New Year's Eve party every year, and there's 13 different nationalities that show up, so it's a blast.
Have you seen an uptick with COVID? COVID related people, I don't know how, that's
Yeah.
probably not the right word. People during COVID who've said, screw
Oh
it up.
yeah.
I'm moving and going remote, or I'm going to go, especially mountain towns in the United States are just booming because people are buying real estate and saying, hey, I can live and work here. Is that happening there?
And it's happening a ton in Sham, especially with the Brits, right? Because of Brexit and Britain getting so hard locked down. As many got out and got over here as as I think possible, and are just enjoying the lifestyle. And
What's
it's
the cost of
absolutely
living like?
ridiculous, Aspen like.
Oh, is
So
it? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's property never goes on sale because the chalets have been in families for generations and generations. So it's tough to find a spot, but there's valleys and areas around Sham that are a short car ride or short bus ride, and I try and do all my mountaineering, eco mountaineering, right? So I'll try and take the train or take the bus whenever I can to go do a climb or do a ski or something like that, and it's easy to do that. So
Is it?
yeah, it's a great,
That's
it's
cool
a
about
great,
Europe.
great place for people who want to come and live this outdoor lifestyle.
Yeah, that's neat. Well, that's not what we, decided to talk about, but it's fascinating to me. I don't think I've ever disclosed this, but I'm very interested in getting an EU passport. I'm very
Mm.
interested in being a citizen of the world and not just the United States. And I have nothing against the United States. Well, maybe a little bit. There's a little bit of the politics that is just really.
We all have a few axes to grind.
Yeah, we've got a few axes to grind with the politics and with the negativity and with the media. But I love America and I love the places that I have here that I love to do some of the things that you do. I love doing that in America, out in Utah and up in Lake Placid, New York. But I feel that we're heading into a new era where, we're all global citizens, and I'm not talking about that from like an elitist globalism perspective, like a leftist elitist
Yeah,
perspective.
right.
I'm talking about this expansion of consciousness, people feeling, and what you've experienced with your work and the people you train, more connection to everybody, and recognizing similarities as opposed to differences, and
Hmm.
wanting to be a citizen of the world and to do good and be good, right, for all of
Yeah,
humanity and the planet. And so
yeah,
as part of that, like, why not have, an EU passport or live in another country? And you've already lived that.
yeah.
And what does that like do to your sense of just your sense of self, to have two passports, to be free to roam between Europe and the United States without thinking that you're a foreigner?
I think, Mark, the most amazing thing to come out of it for me, and COVID has amplified this for sure, is that I do definitely feel like a global citizen. Before COVID, I was going back and forth all the time, and really taking advantage of globalization. I was in the States 2 weeks, and then back over in Sham for 2 weeks. And now I think, while globalization is still incredibly important and a big influence on our world, I think localization, and
Hmm.
in the way that you said it, being connected when I'm in Chamonix, being connected to the people here,
In
and
Chamonix, right? I
in
agree.
Chamonix, and it's connected through all the things we do, and talking about snow conditions, talking about availability or weather, or new routes, or talking about politics that influence us here, or wanting
Hmm.
to know more information about the United States, and understanding other people's beliefs and behaviors, and so it's amazing to come particularly to a place like Chamonix, where there's so much diversity in backgrounds, in
Hmm.
nationality, and religion, and work things that got people here or allowed them to come here, that you really feel like everything you need is right here. You don't have to go anywhere. You're connected
Hmm.
to this community, and it's an incredible community. And I
Hmm.
think that holds true wherever you are now. I think
Hmm.
being local, eating local, buying local, and engaging and
Hmm.
impacting local is the new globalism.
I totally agree with that. It's counterintuitive, but we've seen how globalism is really, and the way our economic systems and supply lines are set up is just not sustainable. And with a movement back toward local food production and local
Yeah,
distribution, and self-sustainability at a local level, but at the same time having the mindset that your actions where you are can affect the entire world. So I'm going to
yeah,
clear across the world on another continent, so that to have a global perspective, a global inclusiveness, a global care and concern, while having a local support structure and a focus on taking care of your piece of land, right?
yeah. and
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 your
where
peep and your local peeps, right?
That's it, and we're
Yeah,
we're our own butterfly effect,
that's
right?
right.
So what we do here and how we engage in this community is going to impact people on the other side of the
Yeah.
planet.
Wouldn't it be cool? Now, this works for both an individual as well as an organization, as well as a community, like um, Sham, as you call it, or
Yeah,
Encinitas, where I live,
yeah.
is if we could all endeavor to be the model for the rest of the world,
Hmm.
right? If we could
Yep.
all endeavor to lead by example, right? If
Yeah.
every community, every organization, and every individual took that as a personal stand to lead by example in terms of, holistic health, integrative health, fitness, all around, you know, um, development of the mind, body, and the spirit, develop self-sustainable, and close to the earth type policies, and taking
Hmm.
care of the elderly, and really, really digging into education and how to educate at a personalized, manner, as well as personalized medicine, and healing instead of, dealing with sickness. I mean, there's just so many things that we already know to be good and right and just, but we just can't do it from a top down bureaucratic 20th century kind of model anymore. You
And
know,
it's
it's got
funny.
to be
I think
driven by pods of individuals and integral commons type of thing, you know?
and if each individual takes 100% accountability for it,
Right.
it's when you start giving away that accountability, which
Right.
is natural, because a lot of
Well,
people get
governments
into
want to take it, right? Governments will take as
yeah,
much as
yeah,
you give them, and they'll take
yeah,
what you even don't want to give them. But again, that centralized craving for control, there's a huge pushback against that, in my opinion, these days. I mean, look at the whole decentralized movement with blockchain. And,
yeah,
I think that's a dying, those are the graspings of a dying dinosaur model, right? And it's, you're going to see that fall apart in the next 20 to 50 years, I think,
yeah. I
or
think you're right.
sooner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I want to talk also about your life and your work with fear, especially as it pertains to how to help people deal with fear of, COVID and, the things we're talking about, government overreach and
Yeah.
economic, the destruction from the economic shutdowns, oh, you know,
Hmm.
as it relates to how people navigate that. But when it comes to like you're being a tech entrepreneur, and I'm fascinated with blockchain
Hmm.
and the integration of, blockchain and AI, and create this idea that the blockchain is creating a new internet that's decentralized, that will take the power back away from Facebooks and Googles of the world, which have basically completely raped the,
Yeah.
humanity's privacy as well as their content,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And used us, it's probably not intentional. Like, I don't think they did it on purpose. It's just the business model turned out to be where, you've heard this before, that we became the product, not the customer, right? Because
Yeah.
they're using all of our data, all of our, information, all of our content. Not We don't get paid for it. We're
Yeah.
not sovereign anymore in the eyes of Google and Twitter and Facebook. And in fact, not only that, but they can censor us now, which
Well,
is
that's,
to
I
me
was
one of
just
the
going to
most
say, Mark,
mind-boggling developments. Right?
that's the
Crazy.
scariest part, is that I mean, I don't think, and I've got Russian friends who will tell you this as well. I don't think that the government should be getting involved in how to control private corporations. But I think there has to be a solution to the fact that when a social media company like Twitter can shut down someone just by choice, who made
Agree. It's
Jack
crazy.
Dorsey the czar of what information gets disseminated, right?
Right.
Because
Totally agree.
he's no more able to justify than us. But on the same token, if I go back to me taking 100% accountability, like probably a ton of your listeners, that's why I switched to Telegram, right?
Yeah.
It's
Right.
it's
Yeah. You
I
can
get
vote
off.
vote with your fingers in your pocketbook. Right.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, I
And
agree
so
with that.
that's what we got to do.
What do you think of Bitcoin as a global reserve, you know, currency like global
Currency.
gold?
So
Not
I
not
think
necessarily currency, but I think it's more become more of a store of value, and that's the real value is digital gold, as opposed to thinking that people are going to actually buy a Tesla. I mean, people have bought a Tesla with it, which is
oh yeah, of course,
probably a
yeah.
big mistake. Just walked away
Bought
from millions
yachts
of
with
dollars,
it. Yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly. Well, that I mean, I think Bitcoin and blockchain, obviously, as many of your listeners probably know way more than I do about it, are two very separate things.
Right.
And I think the notion of blockchain for security and provenance and being able to remove threat of mass hacks
Mm-hmm.
or ransom attacks or that sort of thing, I think is hugely useful.
It
And I
cuts
think
out the middleman in a lot of cases, which is a big threat for the old model. But
yeah,
these
exactly,
DeFi, decentralized finance. I mean, you're going to be able to bank without a bank. You're
yeah.
going to be able to get a
And
loan without a mortgage company, and right, and so on and so forth. It's crazy.
and and that's exactly right, and that's where the value lies in being able to control, again, your financial
Mm-hmm.
reserves, your financial future, and especially across currencies, right,
Mm-hmm.
and across borders. That's the
Mm-hmm.
probably the most exciting thing. And
Agree.
I've got a little bit of Bitcoin, a little bit of Ethereum,
Mm-hmm.
and I think Bitcoin in the next year goes over 100 grand.
100%. I totally agree. Yeah, I've been a big fan of Bitcoin and always kicking myself in the butt because I bought, well over 100 a few years ago, and then I sold most of it. and
Oh,
I also inadvertently transferred 4 Bitcoin to an Ethereum address and lost it. I'm like,
oh
I've been all
gosh.
over the place with it, right? But I slowly clawed my way back, and I have some holdings.
There you go.
I think it is a store of gold. When I finally heard that Michael Sawyer, from MicroStrategy buying in for, replacing their cash treasury reserves for Bitcoin, and then Elon doing it with Tesla, and then a lot of major universities, were quietly putting some of their endowments, into it.
Yeah.
You're going to find it, I think, in the next 2 to 3 years, where if you don't have a percentage of your reserves and you're a Fortune 500 and you're a pension fund, right, and you're a
Yeah.
mutual fund, and don't have a Bitcoin option, then you're going to be toast, because with all the money printing, the value of the dollar is creeping down. It always has. I mean, I think the value of the dollar is 10% today of what it was in early 1980s.
Yeah. I
Right.
believe it.
So if we can, if the values of the dollar is going to depreciate like that, and even accelerate that depreciation with all the money printing, and
Yeah.
Bitcoin, because it's fixed supply of 21 million, of which close to 4 million have been lost, like my 4 Bitcoin.
Yeah. You're
So it's
sadly in that
uh,
category.
fixed supply with more, with the potential to have, trillions of dollars flowing into it. It's just
Yeah.
inevitable. Supply and demand says that Bitcoin is going to be worth well over $100,000 within
Yeah.
12 months to 18 months. And I believe some of the predictions that say 500 to even $1 million per Bitcoin. I really believe
Yeah. I
that.
don't,
Now, unless
I don't,
unless governments come in and around the world and say, screw this, we're going to make it illegal. And I think that would push more people into it. And I think governments would fall if they did that. The genie's out of the bottle.
I think so too, but I don't think you get those huge values until there becomes material usage. And that's the
Yeah.
problem right now. You can't buy the house.
Doesn't
You
have a
can't
good
buy the
use
car
case,
with
right?
yeah.
Too
So
volatile. Yeah.
I think that's what right now puts the ceiling on Bitcoin, and the fact that it's high beta. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
can go from 20 grand up to 30 grand in the course of a month, or
And back down in
shorter.
this,
Yeah,
shorter
back
time.
down.
Yeah, I
Yep.
agree. It's going to take some time, but it's fascinating to watch anyways, right?
Yeah, but that's I mean, the advice I give everyone who asks me, and I've got I've invested now in almost 70 different startups, and people say, well, what about VC invested, but what about this? And I say, look, take 5 to 7% of your liquid net worth and put it in Bitcoin,
Yeah, I
and
agree.
just
Yeah.
and just ride it out and expect it to be there for 10 years, 15 years.
Yeah, and don't wait for some perfect moment, right?
No,
You can't time
no,
Bitcoin, just like you really can't time the market. Don't wait. Just start. I like these new platforms. There's some great apps or blockchain solutions where you can kind of micro invest, and you can top off your credit cards. And you got
yeah.
to be very careful that you're not getting scammed. I got scammed by a company called CoinSeed, which
Mm.
was taking like $20 out of my account. And they started taking $40 out without authorization. And then I tried to get
Oh
my money
wow.
back, and chirp, chirp. And I'm like, I just got scammed. Good thing it was only $1,200 and not
Oh man.
20,000. Yeah. So you got
Yeah,
to be
well,
careful. Do your research. Do your research.
Coinbase is a friend of mine started Coinbase a few years ago. They're
Oh,
reputable,
wow. Yeah.
and I've been
Coinbase is
using them
awesome.
forever. So yeah, so that's a
Coinbase
good one.
rocks. Yeah, I totally agree.
But
So,
you mentioned acting versus taking the action and finding the right time to do it, and that's what this whole year of COVID has I think can be boiled down to and split into two different camps. I think that everyone that I've worked with so far this or in the past, let's call it 11 months, has definitely bifurcated
mhm,
across those two, on one side of the action or the other.
hunkering down and waiting and riding out the storm, or looking at it as a massive opportunity to pivot and to move, physically move their mind, do something different, reinvent themselves. I've seen the same
And
thing.
that's
Yeah.
that. It's how can we create an advantage out of this
Right.
adversity?
Right.
And one of the scientific facts I was just telling a friend of mine is when a mouse is scared, they freeze. When a leopard is scared, it takes massive, swift, and oftentimes deadly action. Right.
That's right.
So
Like
do you want
it's
to
like the
be? Do you
difference
want
between a Navy SEAL and I hesitate to say some
and a cook?
and a cook. Yeah. Thank you.
So yeah, unless the cook is Steven Seagal,
Right.
but
Right.
the and that's it. And I think I look at I was just with a Fortune 500 company a couple weeks ago, and I said, look, you can either be the mouse or you can be the leopard. And what happens is it starts with a level of fear, and that fear elicits the response. And then even after with vaccines out and
Hmm.
young people aren't dying, and you've had a few friends who had it, so the fear diminishes, but it creates uncertainty. And you're always
Hmm.
talking about VUCA and
Hmm.
the volatility, the uncertainty, but you still have the mice of the world frozen,
Right.
not acting, and the leopards of the world are sitting there doing exactly what you and I have been doing. And this is how I ran my companies. We're observing what's going on around us. We're orienting ourselves to the best possible manner. We're deciding, acting, and then doing it all over again.
Hmm.
And you can see people who are creating a huge advantage. Friends of ours who are writers who are just cranking out in the
Yeah,
past 6 months because
I know.
they're not speaking, they're not on the road, so they've gotten more done in 6 months than they have in the previous 3 or 4 years. And
I
those are
know.
the people that I want my friends and family to be like.
Totally agree. That's interesting. You bring up a good point. Once people, it's almost a learned response, right? That then
Yeah.
becomes a habitual pattern. So if you're a mouse and, crisis strikes and you freeze, okay, no problem. You've learned a behavior. It's going to take you a while to unfreeze, but you'll go back around your business. But the next time it happens, you freeze again,
Yeah.
right? And now you've created a pattern.
Yeah.
Because there's
Yep.
always going to be crisis. There's
Yep.
always crisis. There's always challenges, always ups and downs. COVID's just, the latest example of that, right? And so the mouse gets complacent, but then it freezes and then it freezes and then it freezes again. Pretty soon it can't get unstuck. And you get into
Yeah.
that fixed mindset and that stuckness. Organizations can have that same response, right? Because the organization is just
For sure.
a collective mindset, and that collective mindset could either be the leopard or the mouse. Have you found that?
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
organizations and governments, right?
And governments,
In
right?
two of my companies, we did a lot of government contracting and a lot of work with different branches. And so it's the same thing, the complacency and the analysis paralysis. And you boil it down to one thing, Mark, and that's fear. Right? People
Mm-hmm.
are afraid to make a decision because it hasn't gotten approval, afraid to make a decision because we've never tried this before in our
Mm-hmm.
organization, afraid to make a decision because we're going to fail. And what they're doing is failing to act. And
Mm-hmm.
when you fail to act, you're not able to pull in all this new information. As you know, we've talked
Mm-hmm.
about the OODA loop a
Mm-hmm.
bunch, and and we hit on it in the audio version of Fear is Fuel coming out. And one of the things that I've always said, and I can't remember if we've talked about this in the past or not, I've run my companies and my athletic endeavors and everything else by the OODA loop. But
Mm-hmm.
I believe there's a B that has to go before that for normal people.
Mm-hmm.
So when John Boyd came up with the OODA loop, he was talking about highly trained fighter pilots.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Right.
B that I put in front of it is belief.
Mm-hmm.
And fighter pilots have a belief in themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You won't find anyone cockier than than Maverick and
Mm-hmm.
Goose, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
so they have that belief already. Not everybody has that, and not all of the people come naturally. Some people have it through faith and they believe things will work out. We've got this CEO whisperer who's in one of my chapters as well, named Diana Chapman, and she's works with tons of Silicon Valley CEOs, from Tim Ferriss to guys at Tesla and everyone in between. And one of the things she always says is the world's a very friendly place. And if you believe that, then you start to have this
Mm-hmm.
belief and this understanding of how your life can change when you start to use that OODA loop. But if you
Yeah.
don't have that belief and you try and jump into the OODA loop, you get fragmented. You know, you stop in the middle of observing, and then you go back to trying to
Mm-hmm.
decide on
Mm-hmm.
something new, or you just don't take the action.
Right.
And it's that belief, I think, that a lot of people need in these times of uncertainty.
Yeah,
Like
I agree
if
with
you
that.
if you want to change and get your ass off the couch and stop waiting for the end of COVID and stop waiting for the next PPP check and stop waiting for what's going to happen next, then you've got to believe that whatever action you take is going to work out for the better.
Mm-hmm. Well, ultimately, everything comes down to mindset and and the thoughts that you allow yourself to have, which is basically what a belief is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And curating those thoughts through mindfulness and being and contemplation and self-awareness, the self-examined life, whether you're an individual or an organization, not worth
Yeah.
living. He says, Socrates says, for an organization, the unexamined organizational life will lead to, being frozen in fear and extinction before long. I would
Yeah.
add that there's two more steps that are really important. In the SEALs, we use the acronym PBTA in addition to the OODA loop, but the OODA loop kind of covers the T and the A, and I'll explain. So P simply means pause, and you'll love this because you know that by pausing, you just stop the insertion to the amygdala. You just stop everything because
Yep.
the information comes to the amygdala, and as you describe in your book, Fear is Fuel, immediately it triggers the fight or flight response. Well, the amygdala is searching for risk or reward, good or bad. And most of anything that's a stressor or trigger like COVID is going to be perceived as bad, immediately triggering the
Yeah.
sympathetic nervous system. And at an organizational level or leadership level, that sympathetic nervous system looks like all stop, right? 3 alarm fire, freeze what
Yeah.
you're doing, massive confusion. What do we do now? Looking for answers, looking for the fear guru to help you out, but not being autonomous and moving forward.
Yeah.
Using doubt to be eliminated through action. And so, pausing and just pausing to digest and to stop and to interrupt that fear loop. Then breathe into it, right? So for an
Yeah.
individual, that literally means breathe. And I know you recommend breathing practice. That's like slow down. And now let's reverse the fear loop and activate the courage loop. These are words that I use in my book, my writing.
Yeah.
Once you got the courage loop going, that's where belief kicks in. I got this. We can figure this out. This is going to make us stronger, right? This is an opportunity as opposed to holy shit, we're going to be dead. And then, so PB, pause, breathe, and pause, breathe, activate belief. So maybe it's double B there. Then you
Mhm.
think and you act, the T and the A. And the think is observe. This is where the OODA loop comes in handy, the OOD. Observe what's really happening in the environment, study it, research it. You don't need to, like, unless, someone's pointing a gun at you,
Yeah.
you can take, a few cycles to really think through, but then you've got to act. So we're looking like for an 80% solution, not 100%. We're not perfect. You can't be perfect in a crisis. You can't be perfect anytime. So you observe, you orient, and then you make a decision and you stand by the decision. And here's the key. When you decide, like in the SEAL team, you might have 2/3 of the team who thinks it's a great idea, and 1/3 is like, that's going to get us killed.
Yeah.
Or I don't agree with it. Or it wasn't my idea. Doesn't matter. That 1/3 gets behind the idea and you execute with full support.
Yeah.
100% buy-in, even if 30% don't agree. Does that make sense? So the
Yeah.
action,
Yeah.
how an elite team acts is really important. You don't have to agree with the leader or the decision that was made. You just have to back it 100% with your efforts. And then, of
Absolutely.
course, that gets to the action phase. I think we just came up with a really good model. PBBTA.
TA. Absolutely. And the
The
T
T
drops
includes the
down.
OODA loop,
T
right?
drops on OODA. Yeah, exactly. I
Drops on the
like that.
OODA.
There's a ton of neuroscience behind that too, Mark. In the
Right.
book, the breathing, what that does is there's two ways our brain processes information: top down, which is taking information that you see or you hear or you read or that you touch or that you smell from your senses, and that comes in, as neuroscientists say it, on the top. And then bottoms up, and bottoms up is your brain looking at your heart rate, looking at your breathing rate, looking at your digestion, looking at all these things that are happening and wondering if they've stopped too. So have they switched to the
Interesting.
fight or flight? So
Hmm.
when we do breathing, which, as you know, my acronym that I use for people to deal with fear and uncertainty is BASE,
Hmm.
BASE. And the B is just like you and thousands of other, mindful people and yogis and everything else. So through the years, is to breathe. And what you're
Hmm.
doing is if you start doing a 4x4 box breathing, as you call it, or any other set of breathing, you're sending a signal to your brain that says we're not under threat, because if we were under threat, we'd be doing rapid shallow
That's
breathing,
right.
so
That's right.
everything must be okay.
Hmm.
That helps clear the working memory, which
Hmm.
is basically where our instructions are coming from, because the amygdala wants to put up fight, flight, or freeze up there.
Hmm.
So the breathing helps clear that out. And then, what you're talking about is one of my favorite books is Viktor Frankl's
Oh
Man's
yeah,
Search for Meaning, which
terrific.
is awesome book.
Classic.
And I talk about his book in the new audio version with the psychologist from the US Olympic Training Center. And
Mm.
he said the number one thing across all the athletes, if you look at every athlete that he's trained, from Michael Phelps to you know what's his name, Ono, the speed skater, to all
Hmm.
these guys down to knuckleheads like me, he said the most common thing they have that works for them is self-talk. And that's just what you were talking about earlier.
Hmm.
You didn't call it self-talk, but
Right.
it's the belief, it's the understanding, it's the
Hmm.
mindfulness
Hmm.
to put in your head what's going to serve you at the moment. and
Right.
and that all comes from
It's a software
PBB or
code. Yeah.
TA. Yeah,
Fear-based code is corrupted, right? It's
yeah,
almost like code that's got broken, broken codes in it, right? So because as you run those loops, it just keeps weakening your body and weakening resolve, and then corrupting your belief systems to where you utterly believe you can't do something because whatever you're doing isn't working,
yeah,
because your
yeah.
self-talk is corrupting the entire system
And you
energetically,
and you know what? Not just energetically, Mark. This has been happening for 11 months with COVID. People
right?
don't understand. One of the things that I've been screaming about for the past year is that COVID can make our immune system stronger.
I agree.
So
100%.
people, there are people who are doing just what you're saying. They have this nonstop cortisol and adrenaline and DHEA and all this stuff going through their body because they're constantly afraid. They're constantly worried about the UPS guy giving them COVID, or the catching it from their kids going to school or hockey practice or whatever. So they're always worried about it. That's killing their immune system. They can
Hmm.
flip that on its head by reprogramming. The amygdala is running a 2 million-year-old piece of software, right? So
Hmm.
so it's
It's got some
archaic.
bugs.
Right, it's got some serious bugs. And so it's incumbent on us to reprogram that shit,
Agreed.
because if we're living with that in this day and age, when there's way more stimulus, way more threat, way more diversity than we were ever designed to do,
Yeah.
then we're gonna be going down a rabbit hole that we won't come out of.
100% agree, because this COVID will be replaced by the next one and the next one, and human beings were designed to deal with nature's vagaries like that.
Yeah.
We're designed to do it. I mean, look at what's happening in India right now. They're like, what? We don't understand why the cases of COVID infection and symptoms are like plummeting. And the best they can come up is this, like, we have a pretty damn resilient population because our
Hmm.
medical sucks and people are, living in the
Way too many
dirt.
people and way too little.
Right.
Exactly.
It's like,
Yeah.
so a little
Yeah.
COVID is not going to bother them. It's
Yeah.
pretty interesting. Of course, I've been hammered for saying things that, aren't backed by science on this podcast. So I'll just caveat everything. I don't really know what I'm talking about when it comes to COVID.
Hey, so
so
listen.
don't cancel me just yet,
Exactly. Don't stop listening to us.
Wow. So you last time I spoke to you, and you've mentioned this before, we were doing an audio recording for your new audiobook for Fear is Fuel, coming out in audio
Yeah.
form, which is great. And I love audiobooks, and more people are accessing books through audio. It's just a
Oh
huge
yeah,
platform. I love
absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
And can you share? You already shared the Olympian that you talked about. Share some of the most insightful, because you did a really neat thing. I'm kind of bouncing around here, but you did a really neat thing. Is you read the book, but then each chapter you also add a bonus interview. So ours was a
Yeah.
bonus interview for chapter one, and which is
Yeah.
really cool because those bonus interviews probably opened your mind and added new insights,
Oh
which are, of
man.
course, people get to share. So what were some of the top things that you talked about with the people that you interviewed for the audiobook?
So yeah, just like you said, Mark. Well, first of all, the guy in chapter one just hit it out of the park.
That's good to hear. I've heard he's a pretty cool guy, but
He's a pretty cool guy.
he
He doesn't
can
know
be
shit about COVID, but
no, he does. Yeah, he's not a COVID expert, and anything he says that seems culturally or racially sensitive, you cannot hold him accountable to.
that's right. That might have been edited out. So, so yeah, we started with Mark in chapter one, which is fantastic. But the idea of this bonus content was I spent 6 years researching the book and interviewed 3 dozen neuroscientists across the world, from Stanford, MIT, University College London, Bordeaux University, Harvard, you name it. And the top neuroscientists contributed their information, and basically what I did was translate it into plain English so people
Right.
could understand how to reprogram your brain and live this life for your dreams. Because let's face it, everyone was hitting snooze on 2020, saying
Hmm.
wake me up when this thing's over. And that is no way to go through life. So
Right.
the book had all this information pre-COVID, no
Right.
idea that we were going to be set with this level of uncertainty. And so the people who came into it, I'll give you a couple great examples. One is Carl Firsten, who's one of my favorite neuroscientists of all time. He was on the cover of Wired magazine last October, and he's got more citations of his research than Einstein. Right.
Wow.
So the
No
guy, I
kidding.
mean, you can't say anyone's a shoe-in for a Nobel Prize, but Firsten is, he's incredible. I'd go to his office in University College London. I'd ask him one question. He would talk for an hour and a half, and 90% of the words I wouldn't understand. So I'd come home, I'd get on my couch, and I just, I'd listen to it, I'd write down notes, I'd listen to it, I'd write down notes. I'd do that 4 or 5 times, and until I got, his, and that's where some of that, the bottoms up and top down information.
Right.
His biggest takeaway is that our brain is a prediction engine, and we have something called prior beliefs, our past history that helps us predict the future.
Mhm.
So if our past history is being an Irish Catholic kid who stayed in Boston in the same neighborhood where he was baptized and went to school, he's going to have a very one-dimensional view of the world, and
Mhm.
his predictions of the outcome of uncertainty is going to be based on that. So if you want to really have the ability to predict the future and to get out of uncertainty, you've got to increase your prior beliefs, which means your
Yeah.
experiences. So
Well,
you've got to
that
go into
supports what we said
experiences.
about wanting to be a global citizen and travel and live in different
Yeah.
places and communicate with different types of people and open your mind, basically. Right.
And replacing, the key thing is replacing judgment with
Right.
curiosity.
I love
and
that.
and if you
Yeah.
replace that judgment with curiosity, and you think, wow, why is this person doing this? Why, that's really interesting, I want to find out about it. And so Fristen's a great guy. We have a one of a kind interview with a Texas billionaire who was just great. And it was, so my partner in reading the book is a former Boston Red Sox player and professional baseball player for 13 years, Lou Merloni, and he's an ESPN color commentator for baseball,
What
and
do you mean
he's just got a
partner in reading the book? Do you share the reading with him
we
or?
shared the reading, yeah, and
Oh, I
and
didn't know
Lou
that. That's
did,
cool.
yeah, and he's got a great Boston accent, and so I do, we go back and forth, and then we both do the interviews at the end of the chapter,
Cool.
and so it's really, some of the interviews are spectacular, but this billionaire who we interviewed was very reclusive. I worked for his company 20 years ago. And so that's how I got the interview that, everybody in the world had wanted. We started talking and he was, I don't like to talk about myself. I don't want to brag about this. So it was going nowhere. And we're thinking, oh man, this is just, we're fucking dying out here, Lou. I mean, give him a baseball anecdote or something. And Lou said to him, he said, well, what would you tell your kids? And as soon as he did that, first thing he said was, well, I don't know what I told my kids. I don't know if it would be that relevant. And he said, well, what would you tell them? And it was just gold from there on. He answered those next 3 or 4 questions just like he was talking to his own son or his own daughter. And so we got some incredible insights about giving back and philanthropy and how being able to generate happiness affected him as much as the altruism of doing good things as much as it affected the people that he was helping. So he was a great one as well. We had a good friend of mine who was retired as a commander, was one of the first women F-18 pilots, Lori Coffey. And
Nice.
And then she went to Pensacola and became an instructor. And the best part of our interview is we started out and we said, okay, what was your biggest fear growing up? And she said, scary movies. and we said, well, what do you mean? She said, my mother used to make me sit on the couch and watch Creature double feature on Sunday mornings in black and white. And we're thinking, man, she's done 3 tours of Iraq. She was in Afghanistan. She's been shot at. She's got however many confirmed killed and all this other stuff. And she's afraid of black and white scary movies. So
that's interesting.
Some of the insight was great, but
really, probably, but cool back to that, it's something like that helps shape who we are, right? And so, she obviously compensated for that, which helped her deal with the fear, of flying an F-18 or even going for a challenge like that. And that's fascinating.
And as she talks about her skill set, which she was training new pilots to do, particularly their first carrier landing, which is for any
most dangerous moment, right?
Exactly. And so she said, she learned very early on to compartmentalize her fear. And like everyone I've talked to that has the right attitude around fear, we're not trying to become fearless. You and I definitely aren't fearless. We do a lot of things that other people wouldn't do, but it's because of courage, which is acting rationally in the face of fear and not letting fear dictate the action response. And so still being aware of that fear, she learned, and she explains in the audiobook how to compartmentalize the fear. And I thought that was really useful because she'd been practicing that on new F-18 pilots for 7 or 8 years.
And how does she do it? Is there a simple explanation?
Yeah, so she had 2 different explanations, but the short one is she taught people to basically put a chest of drawers in their mind and put different things in those chest of drawers. And she'd have procedure for landing in this one. She'd have communication to to wingman or whatever in that one, and then she'd have fear in another one. And she'd say anything that you start to comes up that feels like fear, whether it's sweaty palms or heartbeat or whatever, put in that.
What, by the way, that's a classic technology that's been around forever. I love that. It shows up in Silva mind control method. It shows up in Gateway Project, which is just been declassified around synchronizing left and right hemisphere of your brain through audio input. And as part of the process, they do this kind of compartmentalization of different fears and things like that. It's in almost an identical way that you just described. That's cool.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love how these things show up. Whether she figured that out herself, like there's very little new information in the world, right, Patrick?
Well, and that's one thing, Mark, from all these neuroscientists I took, there's there's a great the breathing's the best thing. You and I
Right.
have been doing breathing for 25 years,
Right.
and getting other people to do it, and yogis have been doing it for thousands of years.
Thousands. Yeah.
but but yeah, now there's all this neuroscience research that it's bottoms up information. Here's how it
Right.
feeds the brain. Here's how
Yeah.
it reprograms
Right. So
the
I guess in
information in
that
the book.
respect, there is new information on the old information, right?
But no, well,
New
there's
ways
new
of
proof.
looking at it, new
There's new
proof, new,
proof.
right,
Yeah,
new language
exactly.
around it. Right. I agree with
Yeah.
this. So
Yeah.
I refined my statement. That's cool. What's next for you? What's your next project? Are you going to really, I mean, is there a follow up or a sequel to Fear is Fuel? Or
Yeah, there's two things that I'm working on. One is a series of master classes
Mhm.
to put some of the neuroscience to more practical use.
That'll be very
And
valuable. Yeah.
yeah, and the first one's, oddly enough, we just finished. It's on parenting. So it's
Nice.
basically 10 hours of video about how the child and adolescent brain develops, and what to do and why things happen. And most people don't know that the amygdala is fully developed at birth,
Is it?
and the prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop until we're in our mid 20s.
That's right.
So
That's why
so
I give my son some slack still because he's only 21.
yeah, exactly. And you don't engage the fight response, because that's exactly what you're going to get back, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so, but that's tough for parents to do. Believe me, I'm at the head of that list. so so especially with my youngest kid, who's exactly like me when I was his age. So you can imagine how nuts that drives me.
That's the worst. Yeah, totally. So, you said there were two things, and that's one. And what was the other thing?
The other is a more personal memoir.
Oh,
So
cool.
so going back and
You
just
don't
doing
really
a
tell much of your story in Fear is Fuel, do you?
no, I talk a little bit about the Olympics, and then
Mm-hmm.
the big thing for me was, my biggest fear was the fear of flying, because I saw a
Mm-hmm.
plane crash when I was a kid, and
Mm-hmm.
I avoided most of life until I got the leukemia. And then
Mm-hmm.
when I was
Mm-hmm.
in Johns Hopkins and they were telling me to, get
Mm-hmm.
my affairs in order and say my goodbyes,
Mm.
I said, my daughter was a year old, and my wife was 6 months pregnant. And I said, if I get another chance, I'm going to be the kind of dad that can take my kids to see the world, to Disney
Mm-hmm.
World, to Dublin, to
Chamonix.
to Chamonix, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I got out and I started flying.
Huh.
Started taking flying lessons to get over this fear.
Cool.
And as scared shitless as I was, after 4 or 5 flights, I fell in love with flying.
Huh.
And I couldn't believe I got my private license, I got my instrument rating, I got my commercial license, and now I do competitive aerobatics.
Cool.
And I couldn't believe that for 35 years, all of that joy, excitement, passion had been locked away from me because of fear. And that's
Mm-hmm.
actually the genesis for the book. I wanted other people to not have to go through a near death experience
Mm-hmm.
to figure out how to get past their fears, and find out, that all their dreams were on the other side of fear. And
Yeah.
so
That's
so
cool.
I
I like that.
the next book is going to go much more in depth about me growing up, and it's kind of I know your friends, and you've had Goggins on a couple of
Mm-hmm.
times. It's kind of the same idea,
Mm-hmm.
how I went from blue collar Boston to afraid to fly, and now a stunt pilot and world record holder and all that other fun stuff,
Mm-hmm.
because I think anyone can do it.
Yeah.
Anyone
Yeah.
who has the mindset and the
Yeah.
desire.
I love that. And there's a certain type of person who will learn more from that that approach, looking at the intimate sharing of your life and learning the lessons, gleaning lessons from that, which of course you'll bring out, versus kind of a more formulaic self-help or personal development book, which there's a ton
Yeah.
of them out there. Yeah, good luck with that. That's cool.
And so what's next? And I know I keep waiting for when I can come out and roll around on the beach with you for for a few days. But what's next for you? What do you have on tap?
I'm reorganizing my company so we can really begin to scale Unbeatable Mind into corporate leadership and team development, because that's what we do better than anyone else in the world. And so we're working on that and looking at a rebranding, and probably won't change the name, but just really tightening the ship. And I've spun SealFit back out, and I'm going to take SealFit back on as a entrepreneurial project to reboot that and come up with a,
Cool.
much more, a different business model. Because the model I started in 2006, and it's ready for the next generation. So I'd love to pick your brain on that, by the way,
Yeah, yeah,
get some
absolutely.
ideas. And I'm really diving into kind of differentiating the personal branding of Mark Divine. I consider myself an accidental influencer, right?
Mm,
I started out as a trainer to train world class people, and starting with creating the next generation of future special operator warriors through SEALFIT. And the training we put together, as we were talking about earlier, was so darn effective and so innovative because it was multidimensional and led to vertical development, growth of consciousness, growth of awareness, because of the approach we took, which was the
yeah.
integration of physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, and spiritual, those 5 mountains. So that led to me having, now 6 different books with, New York Times
Wow.
bestseller, Wall Street, whatever, all that kind of
Yeah.
story. I'm like, wow, how did this happen? I mean, I got a little bit
Yeah.
imposter syndrome here because I'm just a trainer. But
Yeah.
so I'm trying to step in, probably like you. I'm trying to step into that reality that, holy shit, I actually have become an influencer, and my
Yeah.
podcast is rated in the top 10. And and I've got a lot of humility around that, but I also need to own it. And I didn't have a personal website until last year, and it still sucks. So we're going to rebuild all that. Rebuild. I didn't have my own social media channels until last year. So we should have
And
hundreds of thousands of followers, and I have 30,000,
yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
all brand new. Everything was all kind of wrapped up in my business, and I was just heads down focused on you know trying to make people better. And so it's kind of like differentiating where I'm going to take myself and my business seriously, and step into becoming the person who's worthy of training and inspiring 100 million people, which is my 25-year goal.
See, and I think that Mark, from my perspective, I've taken a similar and maybe accidental approach as well. But I do think if you look at it from the neuroscience perspective, there's top down and there's bottoms up, right? So the
Right.
top down are the influencers, the guy who's a trainer at the gym who's been, working with two housewives and starts his podcast or his YouTube channel, and all he wants to do is become an influencer, right? So
Right.
his main goal is to try and take advantage and get as many followers
Right.
and impact as possible. That's
There's
your
a lot of
your
that going
top
on.
down approach. There's a
Right.
ton of that going on, and then there's the bottoms up approach, which is do some real stuff, make a lot of mistakes, learn
Yeah.
a ton, try and figure out a way of sharing that and impacting the world to the best of your ability,
Right.
and that's what I call reaching your full potential.
Right.
And going from success, or maybe you start a few companies, maybe you won a bunch of races, maybe you
Hmm.
did some stuff, and I would have considered myself successful, but I wanted to be significant, right? I
Hmm.
wanted to use my experiences to help change the world. And so
Yeah.
going from success to significance is critical. And then I think then the following can come if
Yeah. It should show up as it's meant to. Right. No,
yeah.
not to say you don't do certain things, like I was just talking about. Like, yeah, you actually got to start an Instagram channel, and
Yeah.
hire someone who knows how to do that. I fumbled through a Instagram live yesterday. It's the second one I've done. But the first one was like interview, where I just had to click on accept, and then we were
Yeah.
talking. This one I was supposed to be like taking questions from the crowd. And it's probably why it's a good thing we didn't do that clubhouse chat today. It's like
Yeah.
I was just fumbling all over the place. I don't use social media myself. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my
Well, I
God.
haven't done Clubhouse. I got the invite, I don't know, a month ago or something. I'm afraid of it, Mark.
I am too. I've got to learn stereo. Stereo is a competitor, and they want to sponsor my podcast. So in order to do
Nice.
that, I've got to do, like 10 weeks of like stereo chat. So maybe we can come on and do a stereo chat.
Oh, hell yeah.
That would be
I'm,
fun.
I'm
It's the same thing as Clubhouse. It's just a different platform.
Different
you know,
platform. Yeah. I
different platform.
actually think, from a technology perspective, a lot of people have been talking about it. I think it's a feature. And
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think it, I think
Well, it's a
if
feature because Twitter, Facebook, it's so easy to replicate, right?
that's it. If I'm LinkedIn, actually, I would
Hmm.
buy Clubhouse.
LinkedIn's. Oh, that's a brilliant idea.
I'd pay whatever they want to get
Hmm.
Clubhouse and get that moving onto LinkedIn's platform. And
That's a
then
great
I
call.
think they've got a gold mine.
Yeah, I'm with you. Well, we got to move on. So the audio, well, Fear of Fuel has been out for a year and a half now, and you can find that everywhere books are sold. And I highly recommend it. But the audiobook, for those who want all these bonus interviews, definitely want to get the audiobook. You said it's on pre-sale. You can order it. When's so you just go to audible.com and order the book.
Audible.com, Amazon.com.
Amazon,
It's
okay.
exclusive on Amazon and Audible, which I think goes to iTunes as well.
Right.
And pre-order now, and it is available March 1st.
Oh, that's coming up quick.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Well, congrats, and it's so good to see you. In Chamonix, France, that where you are, and
You got.
freezing your butt
I'll
off.
wake your ass up early so you can get the view of the mountains when
Yeah,
it's not dark out here.
I'd love to see that. You showed me a picture. It's stunning. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'd love to get over there sometime, but um, we'll see. We'll see what happens with travel and all that, and
Yeah. Well,
timing.
I definitely think we could have some fun adventures. And actually, you know what, for your listeners out there, pre-COVID, I did a couple of executive forum retreats
Nice.
for YPO, as you know, Young Presidents Organization, and one other Fortune 500, where they brought 8 or 9 executives over here to Chamonix, and we did paragliding and then neuroscience, and then had a 5-star Michelin dinner, and then woke up and did it again. So
Oh
I
wow,
think
that'd be fun. Let's
yeah,
do that. If we
you and
could
I should
recruit a
plan
few
something.
people each, then we
Yeah,
could have a combined Mark Divine Patrick Sweeney event.
I
That
think
would be a
that'd be a
blast.
blast. If anyone out there is interested, let's get in touch, and
Yeah,
we'll plan that out.
yeah, please do. Awesome, Pat. It's great to see you, my friend, and best of luck with everything. Take care of those kids, and
Will do.
we'll talk soon. Hoo-yah.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Thank you,
Yep.
everyone, for tuning in, and look forward to catching up soon.
Yeah, likewise. Hoo-yah. All right, folks. That was Patrick Sweeney. Go check out the audiobook Fear is Fuel, and follow Patrick on social media. He's easy to find. He's a great guy, as you've just heard, and doing some really important work in the world. And thank you for following the Unveiled Mind podcast. Really appreciate your support. And hopefully it is making a difference. Pretty sure it is. Till next time, stay focused and make fear your fuel for greatness. Hoo-yah.
Yeah.
Divine out.